Well, everyone, the Xbox Series X has been out for almost 2 years now, about a year and a half, and let's just go ahead and take a little bit of a revisited review on the specific console. Now, obviously, this console is still completely worth it. I think, it just came out not even a year and a half ago, and because of the way the world has been since the release of this console has one of the most interesting futures ahead of it, mostly because the predecessor of these consoles were really, really good. They were extremely powerful, and because of all the changes that have been happening with the Xbox lineup, just mostly because of, us switching over to streaming services and everything, I think the Xbox lineup is in a very, very interesting spot that I'll talk throughout this whole entire video. Now, if you want to pick up these consoles, they're getting a little bit easier to pick up, so if I find any on Amazon, I'll link them down in the description. You can get them from there. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, let me start off with the availability of these consoles. When these things first came out, we all know they were $4.99 and they were extremely hard to get. You could also go ahead and kind of rent them from Microsoft as well, which was pretty interesting, and we haven't really seen that at a large scale like this one. However, it is a really, really interesting spot, mostly because they've gotten a little bit easier to pick up. You can buy them in the used market for still pretty expensive, but they are getting a little bit easier to buy. Last year when I made this video, they were still really hard to get, but every time I go to the Xbox subreddit or I check the comments of any creators that I watch that talk about gaming related content, they do mention that Xboxes are getting easier and they've been able to find, a certain Xbox model, maybe not the top tier model, but maybe a Series S or X, available and, retailer around them. So I think that's a really cool thing, and I'm really happy these things are getting a little bit easier to buy in that standpoint. Now, that's number one. Another big thing to mention about these Xboxes is that a lot of things, in my opinion, have been changing with the Xbox lineup that more so lead to us thinking that something could end up being happening, that they may end up making some sort of streaming box or something like that. I don't know. These are some rumors kind of happening, but with Microsoft now actually, doing a lot more on their cloud gaming service, mostly with the Fortnite coming out for iPhones and Androids and those things, Microsoft, I think the CEO even mentioned that they're trying to make it more so than just you having the Xbox, that you can actually, Xbox is more than just the gaming console. It's like the actual, games, kind of like Steam in a way. I think that's how Microsoft is trying to get Xbox in. So you don't necessarily have to have the actual console to play those games. And because of that, I think these consoles, just like the next generation of these consoles, they're going to basically be multi-platform. So you won't necessarily have to have an Xbox Series X to play Xbox Series X games. A lot of these manufacturers don't make that much money on the hardware itself. They make all the money from the games. So they would even, I think I heard Microsoft or some of these consoles were selling the, hardware at a loss so then they can make the money back in the games. And I feel like that's what's going to end up happening with the Xbox Series X. And why that's so important now is because these consoles, I think, will have a much longer lifespan ahead of them. We've already seen, in my opinion, people are getting their hands on the Xboxes, but so many people are still obsessed with the Xbox Ones. Even the original Xbox One is still brought up, and every time I make a video about it, a lot of people end up watching them in a duration of time. So that makes me think that this Xbox Series X, because of the early onset delays of people not being able to get them, the future of this console is going to be amazing, and you can even probably buy this thing 3 years later from now, and it's still going to have a pretty long lifespan ahead of it. So that's another thing I wanted to mention. Now, those are kind of the good things. Not everything is perfect with this console, and I will kind of get through it with a little bit later down the road. But on the outside of this console, as I mentioned before, I'm actually a fan of the way this thing looks. Now, I think the PlayStation 5 definitely, in my opinion, looked a little bit better than this console, but I still like the way this thing looks. That rectangular look we haven't really seen from too many different consoles, so I think that's really cool. On the front, that disc slot and just the Xbox logo on the top left, I think it looks great. You had the fan up top too, which was really cool. And, I think that rectangular design looks very different. I think they took a really different approach from the previous generation of consoles. And this thing, with it looking the way it looks, it kind of looked like a PC in a way. And I think it looked kind of good, to be completely honest. Now, on the back, we had a little bit of a different setup too. We had the exhaust fans on the back, whatever they were. We had the back plate where we could actually kind of remove. We had 2 USB-A ports, which was awesome. We had an expansion slot, we had an HDMI port, and we had an Ethernet port and the AC adapter. Now, I mentioned this in 2020 when I first bought this console, that I wish this thing had some type of USB Type-C port on it. I think that would have been cool. Unfortunately, it didn't. They did bring a USB Type-C port on the controller itself, but we saw with Microsoft or Sony, they actually brought that, USB Type-C port on the front of that console. I feel like that would have been awesome, and I don't know why they didn't do that. I don't really understand why they didn't do that at all. But with this controller, USB Type-C port, that's awesome. But I wish they gave us the rechargeable battery within the box. I still think using AA batteries in this day and age is just so useless. And I like the ability of having both, but just give us the ability of having those, charging capabilities right out the gate, just like the PlayStation controllers, rather than having us buy it later or whatever. So that was basically the main things of the consoles. Nothing's really changed there. The price tag has still stayed consistent at $499. These prices I don't think are going to be going down probably for the next 2 years as far as I can tell. So probably another thing to keep in mind as well. Now, luckily for us, as far as I can tell from the, wide range of, different subreddits that I look at in comments, we really haven't been able to see crazy big, scandals or anything with this console. There hasn't been major defects. There were some ones early on, but it looks like everything's kind of been calming down a little bit. And there's been some really big updates recently too for our Xboxes that also stem down to the Xbox One, One X, and One S. So because of that, I feel like this console, again, is only getting better throughout time, and it's been a pretty stable console. I think the Series S has probably had more praise to it, more so than the Series X, because more people have been able to get their hands on the Series S, but I still think the X is at a very good spot right now, where it doesn't have major defects, and if you get one, you're probably in a good spot. Now, who should buy the Xbox Series X? I think if you have all the money in the world, this is by far one of the best consoles you can buy. If it's really between the Series X or a PlayStation 5, if it's really between a Series X or a Series S, then there really is no advantage of going for a Series S besides space. It's a much, much smaller console. This is a pretty big console. It is a large console for sure. So if you're not somebody who's comfortable of owning a big console, or you don't want to spend this much money, then the Series S is there for you. But I will say, and I said this before in my other video too, even now, almost 2 years later since this console's been out, if you still own an Xbox One S or an Xbox One X, I'm going to tell you right now, and you probably already experienced this, and you can say for yourself, there's been games and different, first day releases that the Xbox Series X had, even the new Halo that came out and everything. But to be honest, the Xbox One S and One X that I own, they still perform very, very well. I don't think I would go from an Xbox Series X. I don't think I would go from an Xbox One X to a Series X right now unless I could easily get it available. I wouldn't spend $700 on one trying to buy it. I would wait until they, popped up at a store near me, and then I would go and pick it up. But you can see there's not even those many games that the Series X can play that have, tremendous crazy reviews that you couldn't get on your Xbox One X, for example. So I think for sure when it comes down to it, I would definitely buy a Series X. I'm not saying not to buy it, but if I currently own one of the last generation consoles, even a PlayStation 4 Pro or Slim or Xbox One S or One X, I don't think I would necessarily go up to Series X right now unless I could easily find one available near me. Now I think, like I mentioned, this future of the Series X, it's there. GTA 6 is probably going to be coming out in the next 35 years, and when that comes out, you're going to be able to get it on your Series X, and that's probably not going to be a problem. So I think that's another big advantage for something like a Series X as well. So I think ultimately when it comes down to it, this console is getting better and better and better throughout time, which is so cool to see. They're getting easier to pick up and they're becoming more available around you. However, I still look back at their last generation of consoles and I'm still super happy and, happy about the job that Sony and Nintendo and, Microsoft did for their last generation of consoles. Even the Nintendo Wii U, I've been revisiting a lot of those games. And I'm going to be honest, I'm really happy with the 2010s for sure. Now with the 2020s, I hope GTA 6 comes out and a lot more games come out too. And I guess we'll just see what happens there. So I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.